The recovery room smelled like antiseptic and someone else's pain medication. My eyes opened to a monitor beeping in steady time, and my chest felt like it had been cracked open because it had. The first thing I did wasn't call my family. It was check my phone. The second thing I did was call my attorney. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and my son had just charged $400 to my credit card while I was still under anesthesia. I want to be precise about the sequence because the sequence matters. A man who reacts out of pain makes mistakes. A man who documents first, feels later, makes decisions that hold up in a courtroom. The notification had come in at 11:23 a.m. I know this because I looked at the timestamp 3 times before I touched anything else on the screen. The surgery had started at 7:15 that morning, a double bypass, something my cardiologist had been recommending for 8 months, and I had been postponing because there were contracts to finalize, a project in Aurora that needed my signature, a crew foreman named Del Hutchins who couldn't manage the concrete pour schedule without someone standing over him. My chest had been telling me to stop for 2 years. I had not been listening. That is a separate story. The notification read, transaction approved, 8400 Zeller Luxury Cruise Lines, Miami, 11:23 a.m. My personal card, not the company card, not the shared household account Jennifer and I had maintained for 31 years. My personal Visa, the one I used for quarterly equipment purchases and the occasional flight to see a project site. The one whose number Marcus had watched me enter into a hotel terminal in Phoenix 18 months ago when we traveled together for a regional contractors conference. I had thought nothing of it at the time. He was my son. He was sitting 2 feet away from me. A man doesn't think to shield his credit card from his own child. Rosa Martinez was the nurse on duty. She was a compact woman in her mid-40s with the particular efficiency of someone who has worked the recovery unit long enough to know that patients wake up in stages first, the eyes, then the voice, then the full weight of wherever they are. She had checked my IV line and adjusted something on the monitor stand before she noticed I had the phone in my hand. Mr. Calloway, her voice was neutral, professional. You're in recovery. The procedure went well. Do you know where you are? St. Joseph's, I said. My voice came out rougher than I expected. Denver, I need to make a call. She looked at the phone, then at me. She had the expression of someone who wanted to suggest I rest but understood it would not be productive. Are you in pain? Some. The chest pressure was real, a deep, structural ache, like the building had settled wrong. I still need to make the call. She adjusted my pillow without comment and left me to it. I called the bank first. The customer service line put me on hold for 4 minutes. I counted the acoustic tiles on the ceiling while I waited. There were 22. The hold music was something with a piano that I did not recognize. When the representative came on, a man who identified himself as Kevin, I gave him my account number and asked him to confirm the most recent transaction. He confirmed it. $8,400, Luxury Cruise Lines, Miami, approved at 11:23 a.m. The card used was the physical card on file, not a digital copy. The billing address matched. The name on the transaction matched mine because the card was mine. Is there a secondary cardholder on this account? I asked. No, sir. This is a single holder account. Has anyone called to report a lost or stolen card in the last 24 hours? A pause. No, sir. Thank you. I ended the call and lay still for a moment. The monitor beeped. Outside in the corridor, someone was rolling a cart with a wheel that needed oiling. I could hear it squeak and stop, moving away. Have you ever been betrayed at the exact moment you had nothing left to defend yourself with? I don't mean a small betrayal, a forgotten promise, a careless word. I mean the kind that arrives while you are unconscious, on a table with your chest open, when the people who were supposed to be holding the line chose instead to go shopping. Before I tell you what I said when I called Patricia Chen, tell me, have you been there? Drop a yes or a no below. I want to know how many of us there are. Rosa came back 20 minutes later to check my vitals. I asked her if there was a way to get my laptop from my personal effects. She looked at me for a moment, the same measured look she'd given me over the phone, and said, I can ask someone to bring it from the bag we stored in the room safe. Are you sure you need it right now? I need to look at a few things, I said. She brought it herself, which I appreciated. She set it on the rolling tray table without a word and went back to her station. Marcus arrived at 4:17 that afternoon. I know the time because Rosa had just finished updating the whiteboard blood pressure, IV rate, the name of the attending cardiologist on night rotation, and I had looked at the clock on the wall out of habit. The door opened and he came in carrying a paper bag from a sandwich place I recognized by the logo, and he was wearing the kind of expression that people wear when they have prepared it in advance. Concerned, warm, slightly too steady. "Dad," he set the bag on the bedside table and put his hand on my arm, the arm without the IV line, which told me he had thought about which arm to touch. I came as soon as I heard. Mom called me this morning. I drove straight from the office. My phone was face down on the blanket beside me. The bank app was still open underneath the screen. The last number I had looked at was $8,400. "Sit down," I said. He sat in the chair beside the bed, the one Rosa kept angled toward the patient, and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. He asked about the surgery. He asked about the pain level. He asked whether Dr. Patel had explained the recovery timeline, and whether I would need someone at the house for the first few weeks, and whether the crew at the Lakewood site knew to call Gary if anything came up. He asked all of these things in the careful sequence of someone who has thought about what a concerned son would ask. I answered each question. I kept my voice level. The phone was still face down on the blanket. "You didn't have to come all the way from the office," I said. "Of course I did." He said it easily. "The way you say something you have already decided is true. You're my dad." I looked at him for a moment. He had his mother's eyes and my jawline, and he was 28 years old, and he was sitting 3 feet away from me in a hospital room telling me he had driven straight from the office. The transaction had posted at 11:23 that morning. The cruise line was in Miami. The office was in the tech center, which is 12 minutes from St. Joseph's. I said, "I'm glad you came." He stayed for 40 minutes. He ate half of one of the sandwiches from the bag turkey, I think, and talked about the Aurora project and a permitting issue on a job in Inglewood and a foreman who had been giving Gary trouble. He talked the way he always talked when he was filling space fluently, with enough real detail to sound like conversation. I listened. I asked a question or two. I did not pick up the phone. When he stood to leave, he squeezed my shoulder and said he'd come back Thursday. He said to call him if I needed anything. He said, "I mean it, Dad, anything." "I know," I said. He left. Rosa came in 2 minutes later to check the IV line. She looked at the paper bag on the bedside table, then at me. "Family," she said. "My son," I said. She nodded and made a note on the whiteboard. I picked up the phone and opened the bank app again. The number had not changed. It was still $8,400, still posted at 11:23, still a card he had no authorization to use. He had sat in that chair for 40 minutes and looked me in the eye and not said a word about it. I set the phone down and looked at the ceiling. 22 tiles. I had counted them before. The email had come in at 11:47 a.m., sent from Marcus's personal account to the family address, the shared inbox Jennifer maintained for household correspondence, insurance documents, the kind of administrative paper trail that accumulates over a long marriage. I had access to it from my phone, but the laptop screen made it easier to read without squinting through the anesthesia still clearing from my system. The subject line was blank. The body read, "Thanks for letting me use the card. The cruise looks incredible. Back Sunday." That was the whole message. 11 words. No explanation of which card. No acknowledgement of the amount. No mention of the fact that I was currently in a hospital bed, having had my sternum sawed open 6 hours prior. Just, "Thanks for letting me use the card. The cruise looks incredible. Back Sunday." I read it twice. Then I closed the laptop and set it on the tray table. Jennifer picked up on the second ring. She sounded tired in the particular way she always sounded tired when she was managing something she did not want to discuss, a flatness in the voice, a slight delay before she answered questions. She told me the surgery had gone well, that Dr. Patel had called her at noon, that she was planning to come by in the evening with soup from the place on Colfax I liked. She asked how I was feeling. "Sore," I said. "Jennifer, where is Marcus right now?" A pause that lasted approximately 2 seconds longer than it should have. "He's at a business conference. Tampa. He said it came up last week, something with the Meridian Project contacts." The Meridian Project was a commercial development we'd been consulting on, a mid-sized job that Marcus had been nominally managing since January. Tampa was plausible. A conference was plausible. Marcus was 28 years old and had been working for my company for 3 years, and in that time, he had learned enough about the industry to construct a believable story out of real-sounding details. I knew this because I had taught him most of those details myself. "I need Patricia Chen's number," I said. "Call her office and tell her I'll be reaching out within the hour. Tell her it's time-sensitive." Another pause. "Robert, you just came out of surgery, whatever this is." "Patricia Chen," I said, "within the hour." Jennifer did not ask me what it was about. I noticed that she said she would call, and she did. And 15 minutes later, I had Patricia's direct line confirmed through the hospital's courtesy phone because my cell battery was at 11%, and I did not want to lose the call. Patricia Chen had been our family attorney for 30 years. She had handled the incorporation documents when I started Callaway Construction in 1994, the purchase of the Millbrook property in 1998, my mother's estate in 2011, and a contract dispute with a subcontractor in 2019 that had nearly cost us a $2 million project in Boulder. She was 55 years old, precise in the way that good attorneys are precise. And she had the particular quality of never sounding surprised by anything a client told her. Not because she had heard everything, but because she had heard enough. She answered on the first ring. "Robert, Rosa, are you all right?" "I'm fine. The surgery was this morning. I'm in recovery." I kept my voice level. The chest ache was steady now. Background noise. "Patricia, I need you to listen to something and then tell me what my options are." "Go ahead." My son used my personal credit card to charge $8,400 at Luxury Cruise Lines Miami. The transaction was processed at 11:23 this morning. I was under general anesthesia at 11:23 this morning. He sent an email to the family account afterward thanking me for letting him use the card. I did not give him permission. He is not an authorized user on that account. His mother currently believes he is at a business conference in Tampa. The line was quiet for 4 seconds. I counted them. "That's credit card fraud," Patricia said. Her voice had shifted not louder, but sharper, the way a lens sharpens when you adjust the focus. "Unauthorized use of another person's credit card is a criminal offense in Colorado, regardless of the family relationship. Do you want to pursue this criminally, civilly, or both?" "I want to know what I need to document before I do anything else," I said. "I don't want to move until I have everything." "Smart." I heard her chair move, the sound of a drawer opening. "Don't contact Marcus. Don't mention this to Jennifer yet, if you can avoid it. Preserve everything, the bank notification, the email, your surgery records with timestamps. I'll send you a list within the hour. Can you receive documents on your phone?" "Yes." "Robert." A brief pause. "I'm sorry this is how you woke up." "Don't be," I said. "I woke up. That's the part that matters." I ended the call and set the phone face down on the tray table. Rosa came by again to check the IV line. She glanced at the phone, then at me, with the careful neutrality of someone who has learned not to ask questions in recovery rooms. "Do you need anything?" she asked. "No," I said. "Thank you, Rosa." She nodded and moved to the next bay. The monitor kept its steady count. Outside, the cart with the squeaky wheel had come back around, moving in the opposite direction now, the same uneven rhythm, fainter with distance. I had been awake for approximately 40 minutes. In that time, I had confirmed a fraudulent transaction, read a self-incriminating email, spoken to my wife without revealing what I knew, and retained my attorney. My chest hurt. My hands were steady. I had not raised my voice once. Marcus would be back Sunday. That gave me 3 days. Patricia's list would arrive within the hour. I had the surgery records, the bank timestamp, the email. I had a son who believed his father was sedated and manageable, lying in a hospital bed with no way to respond. He had miscalculated the sedation part. I picked up the phone and started a new document. The call came Tuesday morning, around 10. I was sitting up in the hospital bed, the window behind me showing a flat gray sky over Denver, the kind of sky that arrives in late October and doesn't leave until April. Rosa had just finished checking my IV line and was writing something on the whiteboard near the door numbers. Times. A medication name I recognized from my wife's surgery 3 years ago. She didn't look at the phone when it rang. She just capped her marker and walked out quietly, which I appreciated. Marcus's name was on the screen. I let it ring twice before I answered. Dad, his voice was warm, the way it gets when he's performing. I've known the difference since he was 14. I just heard about the surgery. Mom called me last night. I've been worried sick. How are you feeling? Behind him, faint but unmistakable, was the low, sustained note of a ship's horn. Not a car horn, not a truck, the kind of horn that carries across open water, deep and resonant, the kind I'd heard twice in my life on actual ships. I let a beat pass. I'm fine, recovering well. That's such a relief. I wanted to call sooner, but the conference schedule has been brutal. Tampa in October, I don't know who planned this. He laughed. It sounded easy and practiced. You need anything I can try to cut out early if you need someone there. I don't need anything, I said. Enjoy the conference. You sure? Because I can… Marcus, I kept my voice level. I'm fine. Get back to your sessions. There was a half-second pause. Then, okay, I'll call again tonight. Love you, Dad. I set the phone down on the blanket. The ship's horn had faded by the time he said goodbye. I looked at the ceiling for a moment. White acoustic tile, water stain in the far corner shaped roughly like the state of Michigan, and then I opened the bank app again. Patricia had sent the full transaction log at 8:47 that morning. I'd read it once on my phone and then asked the nurse at the front desk, a young man named Caleb, if there was a printer on the floor. He'd brought me 6 pages without asking why a post-surgical patient needed printed bank records. People in hospitals learn not to ask. The numbers were worse than I'd first seen. The initial charge, $8,400 for the cruise package itself, had appeared on Sunday, the day of my surgery, but the account had kept moving after that. Monday morning, $1,200 at something listed as fine dining at sea. Monday afternoon, $600 at Spa Services Deck 9. Monday evening, $400 at casino chip purchase. 3 separate transactions, 3 separate merchants, all processed through the same floating billing address in international waters. The card had been used 6 times in less than 24 hours. Total $10,600. Not a single night booking, not an impulse, a sustained pattern of spending across an entire day on a card he had no authorization to use, while the account holder was in a recovery room on the 3rd floor of Denver General. There is a particular quality to a number that has been confirmed 3 times. Not anger, not shock. Something quieter than both the feeling of a key turning in a lock that you already knew was there. I folded the printout along the original crease and set it on the bedside table, under the water glass, where it wouldn't be immediately visible to anyone walking in. Patricia called at 11:15. I've reviewed the full log, she said. She had the particular efficiency of someone who has been doing family law for 27 years and no longer wastes words on preamble. Robert, this isn't a single unauthorized transaction. This is a pattern of use over a 24-hour period. Multiple merchants, multiple categories. That changes the legal framing entirely. Tell me what that means. It means we're not looking at a dispute over one charge. We're looking at a sustained, unauthorized use of a financial instrument. That's credit card fraud under Colorado statute. The single transaction argument that it was a mistake, an accident, a misunderstanding. That argument is gone. You don't accidentally charge a spa and a casino and a restaurant on the same card in the same day. I looked at the folded printout under the water glass. Can we document all of it? We already have it documented. The bank records are time-stamped, the merchant names are specific, and the geographic data places every transaction on a vessel that was not in Tampa, Florida. She paused. I also want to note, and I'm saying this as your attorney, not as someone who's known your family for 11 years. The email you forwarded this morning is significant. It establishes prior knowledge of the account credentials and intent to use them. I know. Robert, you understand what I'm recommending. Send me the list, I said. Everything we need to build this correctly. I want every document in order before Sunday. There was a brief silence on her end. Not hesitation, more like the pause of someone recalibrating. I'll have it to you by end of day. Are you sure you want to move at this pace? You're 2 days out of surgery. Patricia, I kept my voice even. Send me the list. She did. It arrived at 1:43 in the afternoon, a 12-item document organized by category: bank records, email correspondence, phone logs, cruise booking confirmation, account access history. Each item had a specific action next to it and a person responsible. Most of them were her. 2 of them were mine. Rosa came in at 2 to take my blood pressure. She wrapped the cuff around my arm, pumped it up, read the gauge, and wrote the number on the whiteboard without commenting. Then she looked at the pages on the bedside table, not reading them, just noticing them, and looked at me. You're doing better, she said. It wasn't quite a question. I am, I said. She nodded and left. The ship's horn was still in my ear, that low, resonant note, the kind that travels across open water. Marcus was somewhere on the Gulf of Mexico, charging dinners and spa treatments and casino chips to my card, calling me from a deck with salt air behind him, telling me he'd been worried sick. I added a 3rd item to my own column on Patricia's list, wrote the action clearly, and set the pen down. Sunday was 4 days away. The documents would be ready in 3. Marcus came home on a Sunday, which was something he hadn't done in 11 months. I know, because Jennifer keeps a calendar on the refrigerator, the old kind, paper, with a rooster on the cover, and she marks the days when family comes over with a small red circle. There was 1 circle from the previous October, when Marcus had stopped by to pick up a power drill he'd borrowed. Before that, nothing, since the Christmas before last. I had counted them once, on a Tuesday when I was waiting for coffee to brew. 2 circles in 14 months. He arrived at 4:30, which is when Jennifer serves dinner on Sundays. She had made pot roast and a corn salad, and the bread she only makes when she wants the house to smell like something good. She hadn't asked me if I wanted company. She'd just started cooking at noon, and I had watched from the kitchen doorway without saying anything. Marcus walked in with a 6-pack of beer I hadn't asked for, and a smile I recognized from a long time ago, the one he used when he was 17, and had borrowed the truck without asking. Wide, a little too wide, aimed just past my left ear. He set the beer on the counter and crossed the kitchen and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Dad, I'm so glad you're doing better. You really scared us." I said, "Sit down, Marcus." He sat. Jennifer brought plates. The 3 of us ate for a while without saying much, which is not unusual in this house. I have never been a man who fills silence with words just to fill it. Marcus, on the other hand, has always found silence uncomfortable. He talked about traffic on I-25, about a project in Aurora that was running 2 weeks behind schedule, about a restaurant in Lodo that Jennifer would like. He ate quickly and refilled his glass twice. Every 3 or 4 minutes, without pausing the conversation, he picked up his phone from beside his plate, looked at it, and set it back down. The 3rd time he did it, Jennifer started to say something and then didn't. The 4th time, I said, "Expecting a call." Marcus said, "Just checking the time." He turned the phone face down. He asked me, twice, whether I needed anything around the house. Were the gutters okay? Did I need someone to come look at the furnace before winter? He said he could arrange for a crew to come out. No charge. Just say the word. He said it the way a man says something he has rehearsed, but still doesn't quite believe. I told him the house was fine. He nodded and poured himself a 3rd glass. After dinner, Jennifer cleared the table. Marcus helped carry plates to the sink, which he also hadn't done in some time. I sat at the table with my coffee and watched him stand at the counter beside his mother, and I thought about the particular effort it takes to perform normalcy. It is exhausting work. You can see it in the shoulders, I let him finish. I let him dry his hands on the dish towel and turn around and lean against the counter with his arms crossed. Comfortable now, the performance almost complete. Then I said, "Marcus, did you use my credit card while I was in the hospital?" The kitchen went quiet. Not dramatically, Jennifer didn't drop anything. Marcus didn't flinch. But the quality of the air changed the way it does just before weather comes in over the mountains. A stillness that means something is about to move. Marcus said, "No, Dad." He said it evenly, which told me he had prepared for the question. "Where did you hear that?" "I didn't hear it anywhere," I said. "I'm asking you." He looked at Jennifer. Not quickly, he looked at her the way a man looks at his lawyer before answering a question he knows is being recorded. Jennifer was looking at the dish towel in her hands. She folded it once, precisely, along a crease that was already there. She did not look up. Marcus said, "I may have asked Mom about using it for something small, a work expense. She said it was fine." He paused. "Didn't you, Mom?" Jennifer set the dish towel on the counter. She said, "I think your father should rest." She walked out of the kitchen. I watched her go. Then I looked at Marcus. He was still leaning against the counter, but his arms had shifted crossed higher now, closer to his chest. His phone was in his right hand, face down against his palm. He lied. He lied in the same room where his mother had just declined to lie with him, and he knew she had declined, and he said it anyway. That was the part I remembered afterward. Not the lie itself. I had known about the cruise for 4 days by then, had the transaction records printed and in a folder in the study, but the particular quality of the lie, the way it required Jennifer's silence as a foundation and used it without asking. I said, "All right, Marcus." He said, Dad, if there's some kind of confusion about the card." "There isn't," I said. "Enjoy the drive back." He stood there for a moment. Then he picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, said goodnight to the empty kitchen, and left. I heard his truck start, heard it back out of the driveway, heard it disappear down the street. The house was quiet again. I took my coffee to the study and sat down at the desk. The folder was in the second drawer. It's where I'd put it Thursday after Patricia's assistant had couriered the copies over. Bank statement, transaction detail, cruise line confirmation, passenger manifest, 7 nights, 2 cabins, the premium beverage package, and a spa credit that had been used 3 times in 4 days. While I was recovering from surgery on a table in a hospital room, my son had charged $11,432 to my credit card and told his mother it was something small. I opened the folder and read through it once more, not because I needed to, but because precision matters. In 31 years of construction, I have never signed a document I hadn't read at least twice. I wasn't going to stop now. The documents Patricia had prepared were ready. She had called Friday morning to confirm. I had told her we could move forward on Monday. I closed the folder and put it back in the drawer. Then I sat for a while with the coffee going cold in my hand and thought about the calendar on the refrigerator and the 2 red circles in 14 months. And the particular effort it takes to perform normalcy when you already know the performance has been seen. The room Marcus used as a home office when he stayed here still had the same desk I'd bought at an estate sale in 2003, solid oak, a crack running along the left edge where a mover had dropped it. I'd always meant to have it repaired. I knocked twice and opened the door without waiting. He was at his laptop. He closed it when he saw my face. "We need to talk," I said. He leaned back in the chair. 28 years old, and he still had the particular posture of a teenager who believes that relaxed means safe. "Sure, Dad. What's up?" I sat in the chair across from him, the one Jennifer had reupholstered in gray linen 3 summers ago, and I set the folder on the desk between us. I didn't open it yet. I've learned over the years that the moment before a document is opened does more work than the document itself. Marcus looked at the folder, then at me, then back at the folder. "On the 14th, I said, "you used my Visa card ending in 77401. The charge was $4,312 to Meridian Luxury Cruises, posted at 2:17 in the afternoon." I paused. I was in surgery at 2:17 in the afternoon. He didn't say anything right away. The laptop sat closed between us like something he wished he could open and disappear into. Dad, I can explain. I know you were on a cruise, I said. 7 nights. Caribbean itinerary. The ship departed out of Fort Lauderdale. You told me you were in Phoenix at an industry conference. The conference was real, I checked. You were not there. You were on the water. I opened the folder then and slid the first page across the desk. It was the credit card statement, the relevant line highlighted in yellow. Patricia had done that. She highlights things. The second page is the booking confirmation, your name, my card number. He looked at the pages. His jaw moved, but nothing came out. The third page, I said, is a transcript of a voicemail you left me on the 16th. You called to check in. You said you were at a breakout session on commercial permitting. In the background, if you listen carefully, there is a ship's horn, not a car horn. A ship's horn. I had it confirmed by someone who knows the difference. Have you ever watched someone decide, in real time, whether to keep lying? There's a particular stillness that comes over a person. The body stops performing and just exists for a moment, caught between two stories. Marcus put his elbows on the desk and pressed his fingers against his forehead. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. I waited. I needed the money. He said it to the desk. I've been there are debts. Dad, from before. From a bad investment 2 years ago that I never told you about. The cruise it sounds insane. I know it sounds insane, but there was a contact I met online who said there was a business opportunity and the only way to meet him was on this trip. And I thought, he stopped. He rubbed his face. I thought you wouldn't notice. You were going to be in recovery. I thought I'd put it back before you were even out of the hospital. I looked at him for a long moment. Outside the window, a truck was backing up somewhere on the street, the beeping faint and regular. You used my card, I said. While I was under general anesthesia, you did not ask. You did not leave a note. You did not call Patricia or anyone else to say there was an emergency that required $4,000. You made a decision, alone, that my money was available to you because I was unconscious and could not object. I kept my voice level. That is not a mistaken judgment. That is not a young man under pressure making a bad call. That is a choice. You chose to do it at the exact moment I could not stop you. He looked up. His eyes were wet. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll pay it back. I swear to God. You will pay it back, I said. We'll come to that. The door opened behind me. Jennifer stood in the doorway in her reading glasses, still holding the novel she'd had in the living room. She looked at Marcus's face, then at the papers on the desk. She came in and stood beside his chair with the particular posture of a woman who has decided, before hearing anything, which side she is on. What's happening? She said. Marcus started. I found the charges, I said simply. Marcus used my credit card during my surgery. $4,300 for a cruise. He was not at the conference he told us he was attending. Jennifer looked at the papers. She picked up the statement and held it close. The way she does when she doesn't have her distance glasses. She set it back down. A long moment passed. Then she turned to me. Robert, her voice had that particular quality, careful, measured, that I have learned over 31 years means she is about to say something she has already decided I will not receive. Well, he made a mistake. He's 28 years old. You're going to what? Exactly. What are you planning to do? I've spoken to Patricia, I said. You've spoken to your attorney. She took her glasses off and held them in her hand. About your son. About my money and who used it without my consent. Robert, he said he'll pay it back. He will, I said. That's not the question. Then what is the question? Her voice was rising slightly, not to anger, but to something that sounded like genuine confusion. He panicked. He made a terrible decision. He knows that. Are you really going to involve lawyers over $4,000? I didn't answer immediately. There is a version of this conversation where I explain myself, where I lay out the reasoning, the principle of it, the part that has nothing to do with the dollar amount and everything to do with when it happened and what it meant. I've had that version of the conversation with myself many times in the past 2 weeks. I did not have it with Jennifer then. I'm not going to uninvolve Patricia, I said. That decision is made. You're going to destroy this family over. I'm going to protect my assets, I said. The same way I've protected them for 30 years. The same way that paid for this house and Marcus's education and the truck in the driveway. That doesn't change because the person who took from me shares my last name. Marcus had been quiet through all of this. Now he leaned forward. Dad, please. I will pay every cent back. I'll set up a payment plan. I'll sign whatever you want me to sign. Just don't do this through lawyers. Don't make it official, please. His voice cracked on the last word. I'm your son. I know who you are, I said. Then act like it. The words came out hard and fast, and I could see from his face that he hadn't entirely meant for them to. He sat back. I'm sorry, I didn't mean. You will repay the $4,312, I said, plus the interest that accrued on the statement. Patricia will send documentation. You will sign it. That is what I'm asking for. That's all, Jennifer said. She sounded relieved, cautious. That's the beginning, I said. The room went quiet. Jennifer looked at me the way she sometimes does when she is trying to read something I have not said. She has 31 years of practice at it, and she is good at it. But I have 31 years of practice at not being readable when I choose not to be. Robert, her voice had dropped, please. He's our son. You can't, a lawyer, official documentation. That goes on record. That follows him. You know that. I know what it does, I said. Then how can you? Jennifer, I said her name quietly, and she stopped. I was lying on a table with a surgeon's hands inside my chest when our son decided my credit card was available to him. I am not asking you to choose a side. I am telling you what I've decided. She pressed her lips together. Her eyes were bright. You're going to sleep in this house tonight and act like this is just business. I'll sleep in the guest room, I said. Give you both some space. I stood, picked up the folder, and walked to the door. Marcus said my name once, quietly, and I paused, but I did not turn around. There was nothing in the room that required my face. In the kitchen, I found my phone on the counter where I'd left it charging. The clock on the microwave read 9:41. I dialed Patricia's cell. She picked up on the second ring. It's Robert, I said. I know, she said. How did it go? He confirmed everything, admitted the cruise, admitted the card, admitted the debt he'd been hiding. I kept my voice low, not because I was worried about being heard, but because that is simply how I speak at this hour. Jennifer is upset. She thinks I'm overreacting. That's not unusual, Patricia said, in the tone she uses when she is being diplomatic about something she has a stronger opinion on. I want to move forward, I said, everything in writing. I want documentation of the charge, the repayment agreement, and I want the other matter formalized as well. A brief pause. You're sure? I've been sure for 2 weeks, I said. I was sure when I was still in the recovery room. I'm more sure now. All right, she said. I'll have the initial paperwork ready by Wednesday. You'll want to review it before we send anything. I always review it, I said. She almost laughed. I know you do. I hung up and stood in the kitchen for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. The calendar was still on the wall, the 2 red circles still marking their dates. I looked at them for a moment. Then I opened the cabinet under the sink, found the spare pillow I keep there for no reason I've ever been able to explain, and carried it to the guest room. The mattress in the guest room is a good one. I'd picked it out myself. I lay down on top of the covers with my shoes still on and looked at the ceiling for a while. In 31 years of construction, I have poured foundations in frozen ground and laid steel in 100-degree heat and signed contracts I wasn't certain would hold. What I've learned, what the work teaches you, if you pay attention, is that the structural moment is never the dramatic one. It's the quiet decision made in an ordinary room before anyone else is watching. The pour that happens at 4 a.m. when no one is there to see it. The bolt that gets torqued to spec even when the inspector has already left. I had made my decision in a hospital room while a nurse named Rosa was checking my blood pressure and the anesthesia was still burning off. I had not changed it since. I would not change it now. I closed my eyes. In the morning, I had a site visit at 7. The certified mail arrived at Marcus's apartment on a Thursday. Patricia had sent it the previous Monday. She had told me it would take 3 to 4 business days, and it did. I know the exact timing because Patricia's paralegal, a methodical young man named Owen, logged every step in the file and sent me a confirmation email when the tracking number showed delivered at 10:47 a.m. I was on a job site in Lakewood when my phone showed Owen's email. I read it once, put the phone back in my jacket pocket, and walked the perimeter of the foundation with my site foreman, Gary, who had been pouring concrete for Callaway Construction for 14 years. We talked about the rebar spacing on the east wall. I did not mention the email. Patricia's letter was 3 pages. The first page was formal demand language return of $10,600 in unauthorized charges to my Visa account, ending in 4471 within 30 days of receipt, along with a written accounting of all expenditures. The second page was the statutory citation for Colorado credit card fraud, which carries a Class 4 felony charge when the amount exceeds $2,000. The third page was a copy of the credit card statement, with each charge highlighted in yellow: the cruise deposit, the shore excursions package, the cabin upgrade, the onboard dining credit, 22 line items. Patricia had also attached a copy of the bank's fraud investigation report, which I had initiated from the hospital the morning after surgery. The bank had flagged the charges as suspicious within 6 hours of the first transaction. I had confirmed them as unauthorized. The file had been open for 11 days by the time the letter arrived at Marcus's door. He called me 40 minutes after the tracking number showed delivered. I was back in my truck by then, eating a sandwich from the deli on Wadsworth that I'd been going to since 1998. The woman who made my order, her name is Gloria, and she has been there longer than I have been a customer, had put extra mustard on without being asked. She remembered. I answered the call on the second ring. Marcus's voice was different than I expected. Not angry. Something closer to the way a person sounds when they've been running and have just stopped. "Dad," he said, I got a letter. From your attorney." A pause. "Why would you do this? Why wouldn't you just call me first? Talk to me." I let the pause sit for a moment. Outside, a truck pulled out of the deli parking lot. I watched it go. "I did talk to you," I said. "You told me the charges were a mistake, that you'd figure it out. That was 12 days ago." "I was going to." "You were going to figure it out," I said. "That's what you told me. You've had 12 days. Patricia sent that letter because you lied to me, Marcus. Not because I wanted to involve an attorney, because you lied." There was a long silence. When he spoke again, his voice had changed again, smaller, more careful. "Dad, I don't have $10,600. I finished the last corner of the sandwich. Set the wrapper on the passenger seat. Then you should start figuring out how to get it," I said. "You have 30 days. He said my name twice more. I told him to call Patricia if he had questions about the process. Then I ended the call. There are things you say not because you want to say them, but because the alternative is to say nothing. And saying nothing is its own kind of lie. The next 48 hours, I learned from David Torres. David and I have known each other since 1994 when he was a structural engineer on a commercial project I was general contracting in Aurora. We've had dinner together roughly once a month for the past 20 years. He knows my work. He knew my wife before she passed. And he is one of the few people I trust to tell me something I might not want to hear. He called me on Saturday morning. I was at my kitchen table with coffee and a set of drawings I needed to review before Monday. "I ran into Marcus yesterday," David said, "at the Ink Coffee on Colfax. He was sitting alone. Looked like he hadn't slept." A pause. "I didn't say much, just said hello. But he asked if I'd talked to you recently." "What did you tell him?" "I told him we talk regularly." He looked like that wasn't the answer he was hoping for. David paused again. "Robert, what happened?" I told him. Not everything. I kept the hospital details brief, but the essential facts, the charges, the amount, the timing, the lie, the letter. David listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've always valued about him. When I finished, he said, "You did the right thing." "I know," I said. "I mean that. Not as a courtesy, as a structural opinion." He said it the way an engineer says something, not to reassure, but because the load calculation comes out one way and not the other. You gave him the chance to correct it. He chose not to. I told him I appreciated that. We talked for another few minutes about the drawings on my table. Then we said goodbye. What David didn't tell me until later at dinner the following week was that Marcus had apparently made several calls that same weekend. Calls to friends, asking to borrow money. David had heard this from his own son, who was loosely connected to Marcus's social circle. The amount Marcus was asking for varied, apparently, depending on who he was calling. Some of those friends had started asking questions. One of them, a young man named Tyler, who had worked briefly at Callaway Construction 2 summers ago, had apparently asked Marcus directly whether the story about the credit card was true. Marcus had not answered that question in a way that satisfied anyone. By Sunday evening, 3 of the people Marcus had called had stopped returning his messages. I did not engineer that outcome. I had simply let the facts exist in the world, where they had their own weight. Jennifer called Sunday night. I was reading when the phone rang. She did not say hello in the usual way. She said, "Robert, you have to pull back that letter. This is getting out of hand. Marcus is beside himself. He can barely sleep. He's not eating." "Jennifer." "He made a mistake. He's 28. He panicked. You don't have to take it this far." I set my book down. The lamp on the side table made a small circle of light on the page. "He used my credit card," I said, "while I was under general anesthesia. He didn't ask. He didn't tell me afterward. When I asked him directly, he told me it was a billing error and that he'd handle it. That was not a panic. That was a decision. And then it was a lie." "He's your son." "Yes," I said, "he is, which is exactly why I'm not letting this go." I kept my voice level, not cold level. There is a difference, though I understand why people confuse them. If I let this pass because he's my son, I'm not protecting him. I'm teaching him that being my son is a reason consequences don't apply. I won't do that. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Then, "He's going to resent you for this." "Maybe," I said. "He can resent me and pay the money back. Those aren't mutually exclusive." She didn't have a response to that. We said goodnight. I picked up my book. The 30-day clock was running. Patricia had already begun preparing the civil filing, in the event it was needed. I had not told Marcus that. I had not told Jennifer. I had simply told them both what the process was, and let the process do what processes do. Outside, Denver was quiet. The site in Lakewood would be ready for the next pour on Wednesday. I had a 7 a.m. call with the inspector. I read for another 40 minutes, then turned off the lamp. 2 months passed the way February passes in Denver, slowly, with a gray sky that didn't commit to anything. The civil filing Patricia had prepared went in on a Thursday afternoon. Marcus had not paid back a single dollar of the $10,600 during the 30-day window. I had not expected him to. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in April. Patricia had told me Judge Helen Markham would be presiding, and I recognized the name. She had been on the civil bench for 11 years. I had appeared before her once in a contractor dispute involving a subcontractor who had walked off a job in Aurora and billed us anyway. She had read every page of that file before the hearing started. She had asked questions that told me she had read it twice. I wore the same jacket I wear to every meeting where I need to be taken seriously. It's charcoal gray, and it's older than Marcus's first car. I arrived at the courthouse on Colfax 20 minutes early and sat in the hallway on a bench with Patricia, reviewing nothing, because there was nothing left to review. Patricia had the file. The file had everything. David Torres came through the security doors at 8:47. He had taken the morning off from his practice. He runs a physical therapy clinic in Stapleton, and I had not asked him to. He had offered 2 weeks earlier. When I mentioned the date, He sat down on the bench beside me and didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "You sleep last night?" I told him I had. He nodded. That was enough. Marcus arrived with his attorney, a man named Garrett Sims, who had the particular energy of someone billing by the hour and not entirely confident in his materials. Marcus was wearing a suit I didn't recognize. He did not look at me when he walked past. Jennifer was not there. She had called me the night before and said she couldn't sit in that room. I told her I understood. Judge Helen Markham entered at 9:03. She was 65, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck and the deliberate pace of someone who has never once been rushed by a courtroom. She sat down, put on her glasses, and opened the file. She read for longer than I expected. The room was quiet enough that I could hear the ventilation system in the ceiling. She looked up. She looked at Marcus first, then at me, then back at the file. She said, "I've reviewed the documentation submitted by the plaintiff, credit card statements, transaction records, email correspondence, and a recorded phone call." She set down one page and picked up another. "Mr. Calloway the Younger. Mr. Calloway, you charged $10,600 to your father's credit card over a period of 4 days while he was undergoing surgery and recovering from anesthesia. Is that correct?" Garrett Sims leaned toward Marcus. Marcus said, "I intended it as a loan, Your Honor." Judge Markham looked at him over her glasses. "The card was not issued to you?" "No, Your Honor, but I had access to the number." "Access," she said. She wrote something down. "And did your father give you permission to use that card during this period?" Sims stood. "Your Honor, my client believed there was an informal understanding within the family regarding shared financial resources, and that the circumstances his father's medical situation created a reasonable belief that Mr. Sims." Judge Markham's voice didn't rise. It simply stopped him. "Your client told the cruise line that the card belonged to him. He listed himself as the primary cardholder on the booking confirmation. That is not a loan. That is a misrepresentation." She looked back at the file. "Your client also told his mother, in a text message submitted as Exhibit 4, that his father had, quote, said it was fine." The plaintiff was intubated at the time that message was sent. The room was quiet. I had not looked at the gallery since the hearing began. I looked now. Jennifer was in the third row. She had come after all I had not known she would, and I did not show that I had seen her. She was wearing the gray coat she wore to things she considered serious, and she was sitting on Marcus's side of the aisle, which was where I would have expected her to sit. She had a folded program from the clerk's desk in both hands. She was looking at Judge Markham. Sims tried again. He said the transaction could be characterized as a family financial matter, that civil courts routinely deferred to family resolution in cases involving adult children and parents, that his client had expressed willingness to repay the funds on a voluntary schedule. Judge Markham let him finish. Then she said, "Counsel, your client lied about authorization. He lied about the cardholder's identity. He lied to his mother about his father's consent while his father was under general anesthesia. That is not a family financial matter. That is fraud. That is credit card abuse under Colorado statute." She set down her pen. "I'm not going to defer to family resolution when one party was unconscious." I did not look at the gallery again, but I heard the sound of a wooden bench shifting, the quiet friction of a coat against the back of a seat. A single movement, unhurried. David leaned slightly toward me. He said nothing. He didn't need to. When Judge Markham finished reading the judgment and the bailiff called the room to order, I turned toward the aisle. Jennifer was in the second row, now the row directly behind Patricia and me. She had not crossed to our side dramatically. She had simply moved. She was looking at her hands. Sims tried again. He said the transaction could be characterized as a family financial matter, that civil courts routinely deferred to family resolution in cases involving adult children and parents, that his client had expressed willingness to repay the funds on a voluntary schedule. Judge Markham let him finish. Then she said, "Counsel, your client lied about authorization. He lied about the cardholder's identity. He lied to his mother about his father's consent while his father was under general anesthesia. That is not a family financial matter. That is fraud. That is credit card abuse under Colorado statute. She set down her pen. I'm not going to defer to family resolution when one party was unconscious. Have you ever been in a room where someone said the exact right thing at the exact right moment, and the silence afterward had a different quality than the silence before? That was the room at 9:21 on a Tuesday morning in April. Marcus sat very still. His face had gone the color of old concrete, not pale exactly, but drained. His hands were flat on the table. Sims wrote something on his notepad, though I couldn't see what there was left to write. Judge Markham delivered the judgment in the same even tone she'd used for everything else. Marcus was ordered to repay the principal of $10,600 plus interest at 5%, plus court costs of $2,400. Total obligation $13,000 to be paid in full within 12 months. She noted the judgment would be entered on public record. She noted that a pattern of financial misrepresentation, if repeated, could carry criminal rather than civil consequences. She said this without drama, the way you'd read a weather report. She closed the file. She looked at Marcus one more time. She said, "I hope this is instructive, Mr. Calloway." Then she stood, and the bailiff called the room to order, and it was over. In the hallway afterward, David put his hand on my arm. Not my shoulder, my arm, the way you do when you want someone to actually stop walking for a moment. He said, "You did the right thing, Robert. It needed to happen." I told him I knew. I wasn't saying it to dismiss him. I meant it the same way he meant it, as a fact, not a comfort. Patricia walked me through the next steps at the elevator. The judgment would be enforceable immediately. If Marcus missed a payment, she could file for wage garnishment. I thanked her. She said, "You were very patient through all of this." I didn't answer that one. The elevator came. The call from Marcus came 4 days later. It was a Thursday evening. I was at my desk reviewing the Lakewood site report when my phone lit up with his name. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. He was crying before he said my name. Not the kind of crying that's asking for something, the kind that's already past asking and has moved into something raw. He said, "Dad." Then I lost my job. I had not known it would happen that quickly, but I was not surprised. The judgment was public record. His employer, a project management firm in the tech center, ran quarterly background checks on employees with financial responsibilities. Marcus had financial responsibilities. He said his manager had called him in that morning. He said the word trust had come up. He said they'd been very professional about it, which I believed because professional people often are when they're doing something they'd rather not do. He said he didn't have income now. He said he didn't know how he was going to make the first payment on the judgment. He said, "Dad, I need help. Can you help me?" I looked at the site report on my desk. The numbers on the page didn't change. I said, "No." He went quiet. I let the quiet sit. Then I said, "You made these choices, Marcus. The cruise, the card, the lies about what I'd agreed to. Every one of those was yours. The judgment is yours too. You're 28 years old, and you're capable of working, and you will find a way to handle this." He said, "I don't know where to start." "Then figure it out," I said. "That's what you do when you don't know where to start." I didn't say it harshly. I said it the way I'd say it to any man his age who had put himself in a difficult position through his own choices and was looking for someone else to lift him out of it. The answer was the same regardless of who was asking. He didn't say anything else. After a moment, I heard him exhale a long, unsteady breath, and then the line went quiet in a way that meant he'd ended the call. I set the phone down. I picked up the site report. The pour in Lakewood had gone well. The inspector had signed off on the foundation. We were on schedule. Outside, the evening light was doing what it does in April in Denver, holding on longer than you expect, going gold at the edges before it finally lets go. I finished the report. I made a note about the Wednesday delivery. I closed the folder and put it in the tray. 6 months is a long time when you're counting backward from a mistake. Marcus had paid back $7,000 by then, not from savings, because there were no savings, but from a job loading freight at a distribution center in Aurora. He worked the early shift, 4 in the morning to noon. David Torres told me this. He'd run into Marcus at a gas station on Havana Street in late October, and Marcus had been in his work clothes, a reflective vest, steel-toed boots, the kind of tired that sits in the shoulders. David didn't say it to make me feel anything. He just told me what he'd seen, the way you tell someone a fact. There was one other thing David mentioned. At that same dinner in late October, Marcus had been doing some freelance estimating work on the side, small residential jobs, the kind of thing you pick up through word of mouth when you have construction experience and need to fill the hours between 4A freight shifts. He'd been in conversation with a developer in Centennial about a 2-month contract, something that might have led to a more permanent arrangement. The developer, a man named Phil Garrett, who ran a mid-size residential outfit out of a strip office on Arapahoe, had done what developers do before they bring someone on for anything with financial exposure. He had run a background check. The civil judgment showed up. Phil Garrett had called Marcus the following Monday and said, politely, that they were going in a different direction. Marcus had not told David this directly. David had heard it from Gary, my site foreman, who had gotten a call from Marcus asking whether Callaway Construction ever used outside estimators. Gary had told him he'd have to ask me. Marcus had not called me. I did not call Phil Garrett. I did not call Gary back about it. The judgment was public record. Public record has its own momentum, and I had not filed it to keep it private. Marcus was staying with a college friend in a 2-bedroom apartment in Thornton. He'd applied for 3 positions at other construction firms and hadn't heard back. Patricia had explained to him, after the hearing, that the judgment would appear on his record in a way that made certain professional licenses complicated to obtain. Not impossible, just complicated. He'd heard that word complicated and understood what it meant in practical terms. He didn't call me. Not once in those 6 months. Jennifer called in November. She said Marcus was very sad. She said the word the way she always said difficult things carefully, with a kind of practiced gentleness, as if the right tone of voice might soften what the words actually meant. I listened. I let her finish. Then I said I was glad to hear he was working and left it at that. She waited for more. I didn't give her more. After a moment she said, Robert, don't you think? And I said, Jennifer, I love you. I'll talk to you soon. She said, okay. She didn't push. Have you ever had someone try to hand you their guilt to carry? That's what that call was. She wasn't really calling about Marcus. She was calling to see if I would make it easier for her to stop feeling responsible for what she'd helped along. I didn't make it easier. The letter came on a Thursday in early December. It was in a plain white envelope, handwritten address. No return name, just his handwriting, which I recognized because I'd watched it develop from crayon to pencil to pen across 28 years. I brought it inside and set it on the kitchen table and went to make coffee first. Not because I needed coffee, because I'd learned a long time ago that the things worth reading deserve a moment before you read them. He wrote 3 paragraphs. The handwriting was uneven in places, the way handwriting gets when someone is writing slowly and trying to mean every word. He wrote that he knew he was wrong. He wrote that he wasn't asking me to forgive him. He wrote that he understood now that he'd taken advantage of my trust, not just my card, not just the money, but something harder to replace than money. He wrote that he was sorry. Then he signed it with his first name only, not your son, just Marcus. I read it twice. I sat at the kitchen table for a while. The coffee went cold. I said nothing to the room. There was no one in the room to say anything to. What I thought about sitting there was a conversation I'd had with Patricia the week before the letter arrived. I'd called her not about the case specifically, but about process. I asked her whether, if Marcus paid back the full amount, the remaining legal proceedings could be paused. She said yes. She said the judgment didn't disappear, but the active enforcement could be suspended at my discretion. Then she said, Robert, you don't have to do this. That's entirely your choice. I told her I knew. She said, I mean it. You've done nothing wrong here. Whatever you decide is the right answer." I thanked her and told her I'd be in touch. The thing Patricia understood, and that Jennifer had never quite understood, was that none of this had been about punishment for its own sake. Punishment for its own sake is just anger with paperwork. What I'd done, what I'd set in motion from a hospital bed at 6 in the morning with my throat still dry from the anesthesia, was not anger. It was clarity. It was the decision that if Marcus was going to learn what his actions cost, he had to feel the cost, not be told about it, not have it explained to him over a dinner table while Jennifer passed the bread and smoothed everything over before anyone finished their first sentence. He had to carry it. And he had. For 6 months, he'd carried it. I called him on a Sunday afternoon in December, 2 weeks after the letter. I'd thought about it for those 2 weeks, not agonizing, just thinking, the way you think through a structural problem before you commit to a solution. I dialed his number. He picked up on the second ring. I said I'd received his letter. I said thank you for writing it. I said that if he paid back the remaining balance in full within the next 6 months, I would call Patricia and suspend the enforcement proceedings. I said it plainly, without conditions attached beyond the financial one, without a speech about what it all meant. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Dad, I'll do it. I will." His voice was different than it had been in Judge Markham's courtroom. In the courtroom, it had been tight, defensive, the voice of someone who still believed he might find a way out. This was something else. This was the voice of someone who had been out in the weather for a while and knew it. He said thank you. I said I'd talk to him soon. Then I ended the call. The largest thing Marcus lost in all of this was not the $7,000 or the job prospects that narrowed or the months in an apartment in Thornton with someone else's furniture. Those were real losses, and they mattered, but they were recoverable. The thing that is harder to recover is trust, not mine specifically, though that too, but his own sense of himself as someone whose word means something. You can rebuild a credit score. You can find another job. What takes longer and requires more of you is rebuilding the belief that you are a person who does not steal from his father while his father is in surgery. That is the work Marcus had in front of him. No judgment can assign it. No payment schedule can complete it. It has to be done in private, one decision at a time, over years. I knew that. I think by December, he was beginning to know it too. Here is what I understand now that I didn't understand clearly enough when Marcus was 20, or 23, or 25. Love that refuses to let consequences land is not protection. It looks like protection from the outside Jennifer's voice going soft, the careful way she'd redirect conversations before they arrived anywhere uncomfortable, the instinct to absorb damage before it reached him. That looked like love. It was love, in its way, but it was also the thing that had made it possible for Marcus to stand at a cruise terminal in Miami and charge $400 to a card that wasn't his to spend while I was under general anesthesia 2,000 miles away. He had never, in 28 years, been required to fully inhabit the consequences of what he chose to do. Someone had always arrived just before the landing. I was the one who stopped arriving. That is not a comfortable thing to say about yourself. It is not a story you tell because it makes you look like a good father. It is a story you tell because it is true, and because the truth of it is the only part of this that actually matters going forward. Sometimes love looks like letting go, but there is a difference that matters. Letting go without caring is abandonment. What I did calling Patricia, letting the court do its work, refusing to let Jennifer smooth it over one more time, I did all of it because I cared very much about what happened next. Loving someone does not mean absorbing their consequences. It means caring enough about who they become to let those consequences teach what you cannot. The site report from Lakewood is in the tray by the door. The foundation passed inspection. We're on schedule for spring. There is work to do, and I intend to do it. If there is someone in your life whose mistakes you've been quietly absorbing, carrying their weight, so they never have to feel it, I want to ask you something. And I mean it without judgment. What are you protecting them from? And is that protection making them stronger or is it making it easier for them to stay exactly as they are? Because sometimes the most honest thing you can do for someone you love is to step back, let the ground be hard, and trust that they are capable of getting up. Marcus got up. I'm still watching to see how far he walks. If you have ever stood at the edge of someone else's consequences and wondered whether catching them was the kindest thing you could do, you already understand why this story ends the way it does. Not with anger, not with triumph, just with a man going back to work and a son finding out what the ground actually feels like. If these stories find something true in you, I'll keep telling them.